Nurse was just taking a nap at work when she was suddenly slapped by a large hand. When she covered her face and got up to look around, she didn't see anyone. Only the handprint on her face proved that it wasn't a dream. The nurse thought someone was playing a prank on her. But when she turned her head, the story took place in a hospital in Mexico and was preparing to interview for a nursing position. The hospital was urgently in need of night shift staff. But due to the long 12-hour shifts, few people were willing to stay. The head nurse reviewed Anne's credentials, and she met the educational and experience requirements. After Anne introduced herself, the head nurse asked her to come in for work that night, and gladly agreed. She then went to the changing room. At that moment, the head nurse gave Anne the keys, and informed her that due to a previous theft incident, access to the intensive care unit was temporarily prohibited. The unit stored potent medications, so extra caution was required. And changed into her uniform and went to the intensive care unit. She took a deep breath and walked in. However, while administering an injection to a patient, she suddenly heard a faint song. She cautiously checked the corridor but saw no one. Yet the song did not stop, and forced herself to stay calm and went back to work. However, she accidentally spilled iodine and stained her clothes. She went back to change her clothes and found that the cabinet door had been opened. Immediately after, she heard a sound in the corridor. Suddenly, a figure approached the glass window and tried to greet them, but there was no response. She ran out to check, but there was no one there. Now she was completely panicked. She hurriedly went to change into her nurse's uniform, but the footsteps sounded again. She peered through the cabinet. Sure enough, she saw the figure again. The person was wearing a nurse's cap and acting strangely, and forced herself not to think about it, and hurried back to check on the patient. But something strange happened again, and was preparing to inject the man with painkillers. But the man said he had already been given an injection. The nurse seemed to be wearing a black cloak. Annie's clothes were different. Annie checked the record sheet and found that someone else's handwriting had been added. The painkiller on the tray had also been tampered with. She thought someone was playing a prank. She stormed to the general ward, and asked Lucy if she had played a prank. After all, there were only 3 of them in the building. If it wasn't Lucy, then it was Lisa. Lucy told Anne not to be so suspicious. Only she and the doctor had keys to the intensive care unit. They couldn't have gotten in, and calmed down after hearing this. Just then, the lights behind her suddenly flickered. Footsteps sounded again. Before Anne could go check, the intensive care unit alarm went off, and hurried back to check. Time flew by, and 2 weeks passed in the blink of an eye. That day, Anne went to work as usual. Dr. Carlos walked toward the intensive care unit, and hurried to open the door. It turned out that a new patient had arrived that morning. He continued with the surgery. This surgery was very important to Carlos, and he was currently short of an assistant. So he asked Anne to be his assistant, and then went to change her clothes. On the way, she saw the nurse yawning constantly, and kindly reminded her not to fall asleep. Then Anne followed him into the operating room. When the surgery reached its most critical stage, Carlos became particularly tense. At that moment, Anne heard humming again. Immediately afterward, the patient's blood pressure dropped. The doctor hurriedly searched for the cause, but the more he rushed, the more chaotic things became. As the patient was about to go into shock, and turned around and saw that strange nurse,